The tear had not yet touched the golden throne when the galaxy seemed to exhale, as if a storm 5 ages long had finally spent itself. The remembered warrior lowered his blade, feeling the gravity of a father's grief seep into the chamber like a cold tide. The forgotten son stared into the Emperor's open eyes, finding no command, no divine wrath, only a sorrow deeper than any scripture had ever dared to record. The third presence trembled, its shape loosening like smoke, losing the will to cling to air. And across Terra, from the shattered basilicas to the rusted manufactoria, a hush settled over billions who sensed something irreversible had occurred, though none could name it. The tear struck metal. The universe changed its tone. In the outer halls, the custodies bowed their heads, not in worship, but in mourning. They felt it in the marrow of their geomantic armor. In the psychic residue of every oath they had sworn, the Emperor was not diminished, but he was no longer unchanged. The throne's hum softened, shedding millennia of bitterness, with a sigh that echoed up the pillars as dust drifted like funeral ash. The remembered warrior stepped back, his breath trembling, realizing the one truth he had feared most, that this saga of blood and broken sons had never been about triumph, but about a wound that refused to heal. The third presence began to unravel, its essence peeling away from reality in veils of darkened light. It screamed without sound, imploding into a void of memories that never were. Its final echo brushed the minds of all present. A warning or a question? What becomes of a god who remembers too much? The forgotten son felt the last tether snap, the bond that had chained him to a destiny stolen before birth. He sank to one knee, not in reverence, but in exhaustion, as the throne room dimmed to a twilight of dying lumens. On Carthian Delta, the mirrored armies fell still. The last echoes of battle drifted through fractured time, settling across corpses that no longer knew which side they belonged to. Then the illusions collapsed. Soldiers found themselves standing amidst the dead, their own, their enemies, their reflections. The sky closed like a wound. In the silence, a lone Vox officer recorded a message into a broken device, whispering that no victory could be claimed when reality itself had fought against them. When the signal cut, the battlefield lay in a peace too heavy to feel like mercy. Canona Seraphine Lix knelt in the ruins of the nameless cathedral, her gauntlets resting on shattered stone as morning light pierced through the collapsed ceiling. The two sons were gone, vanished like visions. Only the afterimage remained, burned into her faith like a scar that could neither heal nor be denied. She prayed not for strength, nor salvation, but for understanding. Yet the Emperor's tear had already rewritten the fate of belief, and no scripture could bear its weight. Her rosary slipped from her fingers, and for the first time in her life she allowed it to remain on the ground. In the sanctum of echoes beneath the palace, Senior Astropath sensed the ripple fading across the warp. What had been a storm of screaming threads now settled into a quiet sea, though its calm felt ominous. They opened their blind sockets toward the throne, aware that something ancient had left, and something equally ancient had awakened. One elder astropath carved a final message into the stone slab before him. Silence is a language only gods understand. When his heart stopped moments later, his face wore the faintest smile. Forge World Silaventris smoldered beneath a sky thick with metallic haze. The final data shard lay embedded in a crater, its once gleaming surface cracked like old bone. Tech priests gathered around it in reverent silence. No chants, no analysis, no augur readings, merely stillness. The Forgotten Son's existence was a truth too large for any machine to quantify. When the shard dimmed to black, the Mechanicus bowed their heads in solemn agreement. Some knowledge exists only to be mourned. Across the Imperium, worlds resumed their routines, manufactoria groaning back to life, regiments reforming, void ships drifting through dust-choked space, yet an unease lingered. Priests preached fervently, but their voices carried a tremor the masses could not name. Rumors spread that the Emperor had stirred, though none could say how they knew. On one agri-world, a child drew in the dirt 3 figures beneath a bleeding star. When her mother asked who they were, the child only shrugged and said, "They were brothers who forgot how to love." The remembered warrior wandered the hall of myriad oaths, alone now. His armor, once shining, bore the matte finish of grief. He touched the ancient seals etched into the walls, testaments to the Imperium's triumphs and failures, and wondered where his story would fit among them. The Forgotten Son had vanished, but his presence lingered like a phantom heartbeat. The warrior whispered into the silent hall, "Was this destiny, or simply tragedy given too much time?" No answer came, only the slow drifting of dust. The Forgotten Son awoke on a barren moon, its surface cracked like old parchment. Stars stretched across the sky in a thin, sorrowful veil. He placed his hand upon his chest, feeling the hollow where memory once burned like fire. He no longer knew his place in this galaxy, savior, weapon, mistake, or a reminder of the Emperor's oldest regret. Yet he stood, lifting his gaze to the cold firmament, wondering whether obscurity was mercy or punishment. A lone comet passed overhead, shedding a trail like a funeral shroud. The universe grew quiet, perhaps too quiet. In the great libraries of Terra, a remembrancer wrote the final lines of a chronicle no one had ordered him to compose. He wrote of sons born from grief, of a god who mourned, of battles fought in memories not their own. His quill scraped like a whisper across parchment as he penned the questions no scripture dared to ask. What is faith when truth bleeds? What endures when even gods weep? He stopped, dipped his quill, and wrote his last sentence with trembling hands. In the void above Terra, banners torn by forgotten wars fluttered in the solar winds like relics refusing to surrender their color. The stars themselves seemed dimmer, as if bowing in respect to a saga that had finally laid down its weapons. Silence settled over the galaxy, not the silence of peace, but of remembrance. The chronicler's final line drifted like dust through the cathedral of stars. Bear witness. For stories survive only when someone chooses to remember. If you wish to stand witness to this chronicle's echo, like, subscribe, share, and leave your thoughts in the comments. The chronicle opens with a violent crack, as if reality flinches under the weight of the third voice, the one older than loyalty, it's older than rebellion, older than every lie the Imperium has ever dared to carve into truth. Its arrival ripples through the warp as a tidal scream that tears memories apart like paper. Astropaths fall silent, psychers collapse, and even the custodes pause with their blades half-lowered, sensing a presence that makes titans feel like dust motes suspended in holy light. The faceless figure staggers beneath the pressure, his knees buckling as visions flood him. A battlefield of suns, a throne of broken galaxies, and a forgotten oath sworn to a master who never forgave. The remembered warrior clutches his temples as blood trickles from his eyes, realizing with dawning horror that he recognizes the ancient voice, not as an enemy, but as the architect of his existence. Terra itself seems to groan. Thunder coils across its polluted skies as the ecclesiarch gathers what remains of his faith like ashes in trembling hands. Beneath the sanctuary's grand vaults, candles extinguish themselves one by one, as though refusing to witness what is coming. He prays not for victory, but for clarity, a moment of truth in an age built upon silence and half-remembered glories. But in the quiet between heartbeats, he hears a whisper that is not the Emperor's voice, yet feels unbearably familiar. You built your faith upon my grave. The ecclesiarch breaks into tears. This grief is older than humanity, and it is his burden now. Across the Golden Throne's horizon of machinery and torment, the tech priests and the silent sisters witness the impossible. The throne's endless hum falters. A single lumen flickers, as if dimmed by a hand unseen. The Emperor's psychic glow, ancient and immovable. Spasms with the slightest tremor, not of weakness, but of recognition. The remembered warrior feels it from miles away, as if called home by a father who may not truly be his. He steps into the palace's deepest halls with dread burning in his lungs, knowing the climax is no longer avoidable. On Carthion Delta, where mirrored armies tear each other apart, the warp itself fractures. Soldiers freeze mid-charge as the sky splits open, revealing an enormous golden eye staring down. Not the Emperor's, but something older, colder, grieving. Time collapses. Some soldiers fight themselves in infancy. Some age into dust before their comrades' screams fade. A single guardsman falls to his knees, whispering through trembling lips, "We are fighting in someone else's memory." His dying breath becomes prophecy. The daughters. Penitent reach the ruins of a forgotten cathedral, on a world whose name no longer matches any Imperial chart. Canoness Seraphine Lix stands at the altar, her armor cracked, her faith unraveling like loose thread. She raises her eyes and both figures stand before her, one faceless, one remembered, each radiating a fragment of a broken destiny. Between them manifests the third presence, not in flesh, not in ghostly form, but as a warping of space, a silhouette made of absence. The canoness gasps as she realizes the truth. The Imperium had 3 sons on the day it began, not 20. One was erased before the galaxy ever learned his name. The third voice speaks again, a crushing resonance that bends stone and flesh alike. "You were both made for my failure." The faceless figure shatters, collapsing into memories that were never his. The remembered warrior clutches his chest, feeling a second heartbeat awakening, one he never knew he carried. Seraphine falls to her knees as the memory of the erased son floods her mind. A Primarch who was not lost, but deliberately forgotten to seal a wound the Emperor could not bear to confront. The Custodes finally reach the throne room, their golden armor gleaming like dying stars. They expect to find the remembered warrior kneeling before the Emperor. Instead, they find reality itself bending around him as the third presence descends. The warrior raises his blade not in defiance, but in sorrow, whispering, "If you return to claim what is yours, then what becomes of us?" The air distorts. The third presence answers with a silence heavier than truth. The Mechanicus of Siliventris decode their final fragment of the star map. It reveals the birthplace not of the Emperor's project, but of its betrayal, a laboratory hidden within the borders of pre-Unity Terra, where the erased sun was created first, perfected, then rejected for reasons lost in forbidden fire. The tech priests chant in despair, the shard pulses, and the entire forge world erupts into flame as if incinerated by memory alone. The cults across the Imperium fall to their knees as their visions synchronize. For a heartbeat, every believer sees 3 figures standing on a battlefield of broken suns. And though they do not know their names, they feel the tragedy. 2 sons born from the shadow of a third who was banished from existence. A child prophet whispers, "They were never brothers by birth, only by grief." She dies as her vision ends. The faceless figure reforms, his features stabilizing at last, not into a Primarch's visage, but into the face of the erased one. The forgotten son stands revealed, his memory restored, his sorrow unmasked. He turns toward the remembered warrior, and for a heartbeat they stand as reflections of a lost future. But the third presence tightens around them, a storm of ancient betrayal reclaiming its rightful place. The remembered warrior steps forward, making the choice the galaxy itself seems to hold its breath for. He offers his hand, not to kill, not to resist, but to remember together. The forgotten son hesitates, the third presence recoils, the universe trembles. And in the final scene, the twist descends like a blade drawn in absolute silence. The Emperor opens his eyes. Not in rebirth, not in fury, but in sorrow. A single tear falls, and the chronicle ends mid-fall. The chronicle opens again with a shudder, so the parchment itself senses the convergence of destinies. 2 figures now walking the galaxy. One faceless and one remembered, each casting a shadow long enough to split the Imperium in 2. The newly emerged warrior in the palace vault stands motionless beneath flickering lumen halos. His features, unmistakably those of a son of the Emperor, yet altered, as though sculpted from a memory that once died screaming. Custodians encircle him in silent awe, their halberds lowered not in threat, but in disbelief. He speaks only once more. Your brother walks blind, and all of you walk in lies. Then he vanishes into the labyrinth of the palace, as if swallowed by time itself. The custodians pursue him, but find only shifting corridors whispering their forgotten names. Across Terra, the shock ripples like a psychic detonation smothered beneath prayer hymns. The ecclesiarch kneels before the altar of the throned god, clutching his trembling hands as he contemplates the return of a figure who should not return, feels the weight of every doctrine, every decree. Every war fought in the Emperor's name, wondering if they were committed upon a foundation of fractured truth. Scribes and acolytes watch as he whispers a forbidden question. If the Emperor's sons return, bearing contradictions, which one reflects his will? The candles gutter, as if suffocating on their own light. Ecclesiarch's faith does not break, but it bends, warping into a shape he no longer recognizes. Aboard the drifting black ship Sable Warden, astropaths writhe beneath visions of contradictions. Two futures bloom before them, one in which the faceless figure becomes a savior carved from grief, and one in which the remembered warrior becomes a tyrant forged from divine righteousness. The ship's navigator screams that both possibilities bleed into each other, indistinguishable. The warp surges with impossible tides. A single astropath claws a message into the steel floor with her nails. Both are true, both are false, both are inevitable. She dies before finishing the sentence, her skull fracturing from internal pressure, as though her own memories rebelled. In the hidden sanctum of the Custodes, Piran Selka stands before the weapon vault, the golden blades humming with ancient purpose. His heart aches with a sorrow he cannot name. Two sons of the Emperor walk alive once more, yet their existence contradicts the galaxy's recorded truth. Custodian kneels, torn between oaths impossible to uphold. Duty demands absolute clarity. Reality offers none, he whispers into the silence. Whom do we guard if the past itself splits? The vault answers with a low, mournful hum, as though the weapons themselves remember a war the galaxy forgot. Far from Terra, on the world of Carthion Delta, soldiers fight not for victory, but for sanity. The mirrored forces claiming allegiance to a future Imperium clash with loyalist regiments beneath a sky flickering with false dawns. Troopers watch their own faces die in front of them, bullets carving through future memories. Confidence decays into desperation. One sergeant, choking on blood, mutters, "If this is what loyalty becomes, then who betrayed first?" A shell screams overhead, obliterating his question before it reaches the dirt. The daughters penitent march silently across the burning desert of Gathus IV, their armor scorched, their faith fraying at the edges. Canona Seraphine Lix leads them, though her eyes burn with haunted purpose. She dreams now not only of the faceless figure, but of the remembered son, and in both visions. They call her by the same name, Sister. She begins to realize the truth lurking beneath her nightmares. She may have stood beside them once, in a war erased from all existence. With each step, her faith becomes less a beacon and more a burden she can no longer carry without breaking. The rogue Mechanicus enclave on Silventris watches as the star map projected by the reliquary shard shifts into a new pattern. Two central loci burn bright twin gravitational memories, bending the cosmos around them. The tech priests kneel in horrified worship. They whisper, "Two origins, two returns." But before they can decipher the meaning, the star map transforms into a face, not of either figure, but of a third, still shrouded in flame. The image burns out, leaving only a scream echoing through the forge. Among the Imperium's broken faithful, the cult of the Rememberer fractures. Half worship the faceless wanderer, believing he carries humanity's forgotten sorrow. Half shift allegiance to the newly returned warrior, convinced he is the rightful harbinger of unity. Arguments become heresy trials. Heresy trials become massacres. Bloodstains mosaics once dedicated to saints. Yet amid the chaos, a child whispers a phrase no adult could bear. They are both true. But the one who comes after is the one we belong to. None can ask her what she meant. She vanishes that night without a trace. In the halls of the Senatorum Imperialis, the High Lords tear at each other with political ferocity bordering on madness. Some claim the remembered warrior as a Primarch returned. Others argue he is an impostor forged from temporal corruption. Even the most powerful voices falter as murals continue to shift, depicting wars they do not recall commanding. Desperation festers into paranoia. One lord draws a power blade against another, swearing he remembers being murdered by him centuries ago. Their blood spills on the marble floor, but neither can articulate why they draw weapons at all. The faceless figure walks through the ruins of an unnamed moon, his footsteps echoing across regolith that remembers battles never fought. Every reflection he passes reveals different faces, grief-stricken, furious, regal, broken. He clutches the reliquary shard as though it were the only anchor in a tide of collapsing identity. Memory bleeds into vision, the Emperor reaching toward him, not with affection, but with sorrow. He whispers, terrified, "What did you make me?" The wind answers in his own voice, "Not enough." The remembered warrior, the one with the Emperor's blood in his veins, stands upon the palace ramparts gazing at Terra's storm-wrapped sky. Thunderheads shaped like wings loom above him. He murmurs into the gathering dark. He walks blind because they blinded him. But I see clearly now. His eyes glow not with zeal but with revelation, a truth he alone recalls. He raises his gauntlet, and the storm recoils in fear. And in the final scene, the twist descends like a blade from the heavens. Every astropath in the segmentum solar screams simultaneously as a third presence tears through the warp, neither faceless nor remembered, but ancient, awakened, and wrathful. A voice older than the Imperium erupts across the psychic horizon. "You have forgotten me." Stars flicker, time warps, and the chronicle slams shut in terror. The chronicle forces itself open again, trembling as if the ink fears the truth it must spill. From the shadows of the emptied sarcophagus, the galaxy seems to recoil. The message "He remembers you" echoes across the Imperium like a curse spoken in every dialect of man. Astropaths feel it etched into their bones. Warriors hear it in the silence between bolter shots. Priests whisper it while denying they ever spoke. And somewhere in the void, the faceless figure pauses, as if the words were carved directly into his resurrected soul. His hand tightens around the shard of the reliquary until it bleeds memory light. He does not know who he once was, but the galaxy suddenly remembers him with terror. Across Terra, faith buckles under its own weight. Confessors collapse at their altars, muttering prayers that sound more like apologies. The ecclesiarch wanders the candlelit passages beneath the sanctuary of parchment, clutching a book that rewrites itself each time he opens it. The once unshakable shepherd of a billion flocks now weeps, whispering that he feels the Emperor's gaze turning away, not in anger, but in sorrow. And behind every tremor of his voice lies a deeper fear, that the Emperor's sorrow is not for humanity, but for something returning. In the Tower of Hecaton, Custodian Piran Selka stands before a hollow relief of ancient heroes. Their faces blur and correct themselves with each passing second. When his own reflection briefly bears the visage of the faceless figure, he stumbles. Custodians do not lose balance. They do not doubt. Yet he feels an old grief awakening, one so fundamental it predates his creation. He kneels in the golden hush of the sanctum and whispers a confession to a god emperor that is not answered in 10 millennia. If he returns, will we guard him or kill him? On the fortress world of Carthian Delta, the Astra Militarum fights a war that should not exist. Their foes wear Imperial armor, bear Imperial banners, but swear they come from a future where the faceless figure rules the stars in golden fire. The soldiers meet their mirrored reflections with bolter and bayonet, fighting versions of themselves who remember victories they never lived. Every death feels like killing a brother. Every victory feels like erasing a future. Commissars burn entire regiments rather than allow the confusion to take root. In the cloisters of the Daughters Penitent, Canona Seraphine licks kneels before the sealed vault where the spear of Aliona trembles behind adamantine walls. She feels it calling through the stone, imploring her to remember a sin she did not commit. She begins to dream of a battlefield bathed in impossible light, where the faceless figure kneels beside her broken body and calls her sister. The canoness wakes screaming. Her tears burn like acid. She orders her order into silent pilgrimage, for she fears that remaining still will doom them or reveal the truth hidden inside them. The Ordo Chronos assembles in the drifting ruins of a time-sundered station where seconds flow like dust. They compare temporal scars and discover a horrifying lattice. The stranger does not merely exist in fractured memories, he is becoming a fixed point around which timelines orbit, gravitational center of remembrance, an anchor. They debate whether the Imperium itself is being rewritten around this single man. Moments later, the station fractures into overlapping versions of itself, each showing the death of the Chronos agents in different ways. Only one escapes, missing half his past. On the black ships, astropaths perform a soul-binding ritual to shield themselves from memory invasion. Instead, their chant becomes a chorus of a single name spoken in 100 voices, a name they have never heard yet. Speak with absolute certainty. The ritual combusts, flaying minds with the truth that the warp itself is beginning to anticipate the figure. Adjusting its tides around him like a beast sensing its master, the surviving astropaths refuse to speak. Their tongues turn black with silence. Far from the Imperium's glow, a rogue Mechanicus sect on Silaventris succeeds in activating the reliquary shard. It expands into a lattice of impossible geometry, projecting an image of a celestial map that contradicts all known astral charts. At its center burns a star long dead, shining with new life. The tech priests fall to their knees, declaring they have glimpsed the birthplace of the figure, or the place where he first died. Their prayers turn into screams as the star begins whispering their names. Meanwhile, among the common faithful, a strange cult begins to form, not of zealots, but of broken souls who have lost everything. They gather beneath shattered shrines and whisper confessions into the dust, believing the faceless figure listens without judgment. They call him the Rememberer. They claim he mourns for humanity more deeply than any saint. Ecclesiarchy declares this a heresy punishable by death. But executions only make the cult grow, as more and more see visions of him walking beside them in moments of despair. Behind the sealed gates of the Imperial Palace, 2 High Lords vanish from existence, not slain, but erased from memory. Their thrones sit empty, yet the council cannot agree who once occupied them. One lord insists there were always 12 High Lords. Another swears it was 10. Their arguments turn to panic as murals on the palace walls begin depicting battles that did not happen, and a commander who should not exist. A commander whose face is missing. Somewhere beyond the light of Imperial stars, a lone ship drifts through the void. The faceless figure stands within its chapel, staring at frescoes of saints that shift to depict him. His hands tremble as he feels memories flooding back, memories that are not his yet feel carved into his marrow. He drops to his knees, choking on borrowed grief as the shard burns brighter than any sun. And then the frescoes reveal a final truth he cannot bear, the Emperor standing beside him, calling him brother. The Chronicle's final scene ruptures with a revelation that chills the galaxy. In the palace stasis vault, where the sarcophagus once lay empty, a new figure now stands tall, armored, radiant with memories shaped into flesh. The sigils around him blaze as if saluting their true master. He turns, and unlike the stranger, he has a face. A face the Imperium knows, a face the galaxy fears. And he whispers, with a voice older than the heresy, "He is not who you think." The chronicle snaps shut, trembling. The blank page quivers as if resisting resurrection, yet the chronicle forces itself open once more. From the last breath of Part 1, the faceless figure stands upon the silent ruin, the shard of the reliquary glimmering with memories not yet lived. His stolen visage lingers in the mind like an infection, a face mourned, a face entombed, a face the Imperium had vowed never to see again. The chronicle inhales, and perspective flows outward like incense drifting through cathedral vaults, fractured by age. In the distant spires of Terra, echoes of the figure's impossible presence reach the choir vaults of the Adeptus Ministorum. Priests whisper prayers that sound more like questions. Confessionals overflow with doubt. Pilgrims speak of dreams where their saints appear wearing the face of the stranger. The Ecclesiarch orders these visions purged, yet he dreams the same face each night and wakes in tears he denies. Rumors seep into the barracks of the Astra Militarum like rot beneath armor plating. Veterans who survived the Pale Crusade feel phantom pain where the memory of wounds still lingers. Commissars threaten execution for spreading superstition. But even their iron certainty falters when they hear the same whispers. That a man believed dead 10,000 years has stepped once more into the light. Some soldiers begin engraving purity seals upon their skin, not because they believe, but because belief has become their last weapon against a reality twisting around them. Far across the stars, the daughters penitent gather in a vaulted crypt beneath the shrine of Aliona. Canona Seraphine licks kneels before the spear, seeking clarity. But the relic that once blazed with holy judgment now trembles, as if recalling sins that were never committed. The canoness hears a voice, soft, familiar, wrong. It speaks a single phrase, "You knew me before I was unmade." Her faith fractures like stained glass struck by unseen hands. She orders the spear sealed away, yet its whispers bleed through ceramite and prayer steel. The custodies feel it next. Within the sanctum fortress of the 10,000, Pyr and Selka's recovered fragments of memory are examined by psychic savants. But as the Golden Warriors watch his visions, they experience something impossible, a sense of recognition, a loyalty they do not recall giving, a grief they do not recall earning. One custodian stumbles, whispering a forbidden thought. "I once guarded the man whose face he now wears." The chamber falls silent. No custodian speaks of the Primarchs lightly, nor of the one whose name remains a wound. The Ordo Chronos delves deeper into time's unraveling. Agents cross-compare fractured timelines and discover a terrifying pattern. The figure's face appears in memory strands centuries apart, in events he never witnessed, in conflicts predating his existence. He is becoming retroactive. A presence rewriting himself into the past. The agents debate whether he is a weapon, a godling, or an echo of a Primarch devoured by history. Their conclave ends abruptly when half the agents vanish, not slain, simply unremembered. In the vaults of the Inquisition, a conclave of the Ordo Hereticus vows to destroy the reliquary shard. But when exposed to psychic scrutiny, the shard shows them visions of their own betrayals, some committed, some merely considered, some inevitable. Terrified, the Inquisitors accuse one another of heresy born from thought alone. Blades are drawn. Rosettes burn like dying stars. Only one Inquisitor survives the purge, though she cannot recall why she struck the final blow, or whom she killed to do so. On the Forge world Silventris, the Adeptus Mechanicus attempts to parse the shard's structure, reflects their probes with answers that do not align. It is both pre-Imperial and far future, both organic and alloyed, both divine and profane. The Fabricator General proclaims it a machine spirit from a timeline where Mars never fell to the Imperium. Tech priests riot at this heresy, some embracing it, others purging their own mentors in the name of purity. And all the while, the shard pulses as if amused. Aboard the black ships, astropaths scream as they intercept memory echo transmissions from Virac Tertius. The dead world speaks to them in the voices of their loved ones, voices that should not know their names. One astropath claws at her skull, chanting, "He walks backward through time. Where's the grief of the Imperium? He remembers us before we are born." The choirmaster orders the ship sealed, but the whispers seep through the hull like radiation. The perspective shifts to the broken faithful. Refugees, pilgrims, penitents, crossing the void aboard crumbling vessels. They dream of a man walking among their ancestors, reshaping destinies with a mere glance. Some awaken in tears, believing him a long-lost savior. Others awaken screaming, believing him the architect of their doom. In these fractured visions, devotion curdles into a new form of worship or a new breed of heresy. On Terra, political shadows lengthen. The High Lords argue behind cathedral walls, each insisting they recognize the stranger's face from long-buried records they cannot produce. Some claim him a ghost of the Great Crusade. Others claim him a lie implanted by their rivals. Paranoia blooms like a plague flower. Alliances crumble over memories too vague to trust. The Senatorum Imperialis begins to fracture along lines of belief, not ideology. Somewhere in the void, the faceless figure walks aboard a derelict vessel, its corridors echoing with overlapping footfalls. Its reflections in shattered bulkheads display different versions of him, some scarred, some armored, some crowned. He touches the reliquary shard, and the ship's machine spirit awakens in terrified reverence. Addressing him with a title spoken only in the darkest rites, "My lost lord," the figure freezes, trembling as though the words trigger a memory he should not possess. And in the final scene, The chronicle reveals an event that shatters certainty on Terra. Deep within the Imperial palace, a stasis vault, long sealed by the Emperor himself, flickers open. The alarm klaxons fail to sound. Custodians rush to the chamber only to find the sarcophagus inside empty, and the sigils of protection rewritten in a script no living eye can read. At the center lies a single message carved into the adamantine floor. "He remembers you." The chronicle convulses and slams shut. What becomes of loyalty when even memory betrays the Emperor's light? The question bleeds into existence like a fracture in time, its syllables carved from vox echoes older than most stars. Somewhere deep beneath Terra's continental plates, in chambers sealed by edicts older than the heresy, dormant runes flicker awake. With their awakening comes the taste of dread, the metallic temps of forgotten oaths, and the faint scent of sanctified parchment long decayed. As the dead question reverberates, a hidden lumen sigil stirs, forcing the forbidden chronicle to breathe again. What spills forth is not a history, but a wound. The chronicle speaks first of the Pale Crusade, a campaign officially erased from Imperial record and spoken of only in nightmares muttered by dying inquisitors. It began at the edge of Segmentum Solar, where star systems flickered out not by invasion, but by collective amnesia so profound that entire planetary populations forgot how to breathe, how to stand, how to exist. Even the astropaths could not name what they witnessed. Their minds came back hollowed, as if scraped clean. In response, the Imperium unleashed its finest, a conclave of custodes, 3 regiments of solar auxilia, and the dread reclusiarch Malkier Vane, but all returned changed. Their memories contradicted each other in impossible ways, 1,000 battles fought, none matching the scars they bore. What remained constant in every fractured recollection was the Whispering Reliquary, a xeno-architectured monolith, discovered in orbit around the dead world of Kefra Ix. It was not ancient, it was ageless. Its surface writhed with symbols that refused classification. Not Eldar, not Necron, not Chaos. The Adeptus Mechanicus declared it an impossibility. The Ordo Xenos declared it a heresy. It all agreed it emanated a low hum beyond auditory range, a resonance felt directly in the bones. Soldiers who stood near it reported memories resurfacing that were not their own. Wars never fought, worlds never visited, and a death that felt intimately familiar. When the reliquary was transported aboard the command barge Indomitable Vow, the ship's crew began experiencing mirrored visions. They saw their comrades dying only moments before they actually did. Every corridor became a loop of overlapping timelines, arguments repeating with slight differences, footsteps echoing half a second before being taken. The ship's navigator warned that the vessel was drifting into a gravitational anomaly uncharted by any stellar map. Yet the stars outside showed no distortion. It was as if the ship were sinking into the memory of space itself rather than space. Within a week, only a single vox log was transmitted, ended mid-sentence. The chronicle shifts, other set of memories belonging to those who were never meant to survive. On the ash plains of Virac Tertius, survivors of the Pale Crusade established a temporary bastion. They were warriors without a past, officers who could no longer recall the faces of their regiment, chaplains whose litanies rang hollow because they had forgotten whose souls they once shepherded. They fought still, because fighting was all that remained in their bones. But each night, the reliquary appeared in their dreams, not as the artifact they had found, but as a door that knew their true names. Some refused sleep entirely, most succumbed. A small missionary order, the Daughters Penitent of the Veiled Throne, arrived to cleanse the wounded psyche of the Crusade survivors. Their canoness, Seraphini Lix, carried a relic said to reveal lies in the soul, the spear of Saint Aliona. But when she thrust the relic toward the dream-stricken soldiers, it glowed not with holy fire, but with a sickly, rippling distortion. The spear reflected back, not corruption, but paradox. The canoness would later whisper in her sealed confession that the minds before her had become battlegrounds, not between loyalty and heresy, but between memory and identity. She ordered an immediate quarantine. Quarantine failed. Reports from Veracterius reached Terra mangled, carrying contradictory battle data. Some messages described demonic incursions, others described Necron harvest ships. A few claimed the sky cracked open with golden light, and the angel himself descended, though nothing corroborated such a miracle. What all transmissions agreed upon was this: the soldiers were turning against themselves, not out of rebellion, but out of recognition. They looked at one another and saw enemies they remembered killing long ago. This was not a war of flesh, but a war of recollection unraveling. A lone custodian, Piran Selka, the last coherent survivor of the strike force, submitted a final encoded report. His voice trembled unheard among his kind for 10,000 years. He spoke of the reliquary awakening, unfolding like a flower in the heart of the camp. Its petals were engraved with billions of fractal sigils, each one a stolen memory from someone across the galaxy, perhaps across time itself. And when it opened fully, he said, the world remembered its own death. The planet screamed, and the survivors screamed with it. The chronicle's parchment flares with residual heat as another memory layer unfurls. The vision of a scribe too petrified to speak. She witnessed Viric Tertius invert. The soil peeled upward like skin, refusing to stay buried. Statues of saints dissolved into shimmering dunes of data dust. The sky turned black, not dark, but blank, as if repainted by something that had never seen a sky before. In that void, the reliquary pulsed with an intelligence that did not hunger or hate. It simply observed, and remembering it was enough to unmake a mind. The scribe clawed her own eyes out to stop seeing futures that were not hers. Her testimony ends in blood. Elsewhere, the Ordo Chronos, long thought dissolved, returned to activity with silent urgency. They warned that the Pale Crusade had not merely vanished from records. The Crusade had never existed to begin with, yet the scars on surviving soldiers said otherwise. The Chronos agents believed the Imperium had stumbled upon a weaponized phenomenon capable of altering the collective memory of reality, rewriting causality with surgical precision. If it was a weapon, it had not yet chosen a side. If it was a species, it had not yet chosen a shape. The final two scenes emerged like static-laced nightmares, half dissolved. A colossal rift reportedly opened above Terra's outer defense ring, not in real space, but in the memory of real space. Astartes sensed the echo of an invasion that had not yet occurred, but whose aftermath was already etched into the warp. Fleets scrambled without knowing why. My lords convened in panic, unable to recall what threat they had just prepared for. Something was watching the Imperium through the lens of time itself. Not forward, not backward, but sideways. Even the Emperor's tarot showed only blank cards. The Chronicle's last scene shudders as if resisting its own revelation. A figure steps from the remnants of Viric Tertius, robed, faceless, carrying a shard of the shattered reliquary. He walks calmly through a ruined battlefield where nothing lives. Yet footprints scatter in the dust, too many, overlapping, as though echo versions of him walk beside him in forgotten timelines. Pauses, turning toward an unseen witness. And for a moment, a fraction of a breath, the Chronicle records his face. It is a face that should not exist, a face the Imperium once mourned. Then the page goes blank, as if refusing to speak the name.